Hello and welcome to this lecture, Project Closeout and Termination. Thinking about the project ending is an exciting time. There's a key difference. The idea of formally studying the closeout phase is a key difference between project management and process management, in a sense that projects have a finite timeline. They are created with the intention of being closed. Process management is about the ongoing core competency of the organization, and it's never going to close. It'll be revised and refined and improved, but it doesn't close out. So this idea of closeout is really unique to project management, and it's worth looking at. Done correctly, the closeout stage itself will add value to the organization. So these two cartoons here, we think about closeout, we think about celebrating and clinking our wine glasses together in success. And that certainly can be part of it, but you have to realize that even during this last phase, you're adding real value to the process. You don't want to be the second cartoon there, or the second image, which is a cartoon showing, hey, we're done, under budget, on time, and great, we'll create next year's budget just based on the fact that you didn't spend this much money this year. You want to, even if you do finish under budget and on time, that's a great thing, but you want to get praise for doing that, and more importantly, you want to learn lessons within the organization about why this project came in on time and under budget, and most projects don't. So the problem with the cartoon is that he's not really taking the time to learn lessons from this process, improve his or her position as a project manager, and more importantly, not adding lessons and information to the organizational's corporate culture. So there's 4 outlines, and this chapter reads very well. It's very almost intuitive, and there's not a whole lot that I want to add that's not in the chapter. Just want to highlight some of the key points that are in this chapter. So types of project termination, the natural termination, early termination because it didn't get to finish its natural life cycle that it was planned on for it, and then the final report. So it's a nice short chapter here. Types of termination, our book explains this pretty well, that there's termination by extinction, addition, integration, and starvation. Termination by addition is kind of a cool idea there, that a project becomes so useful in the organization that it gets adopted within the organization. It actually becomes part of or promoted within the organization. It becomes a process within the organization. It becomes part of the core infrastructure of who the company is and what's going on. I think that's probably a great goal for a project, is to do something that becomes part of the company culture, that we're learning some real value there. Termination by starvation is probably the opposite of that. There the project dies out, and as he says in the reading there, the paragraph there, it's not that you intentionally starve it out. Nobody champions it, nobody's there for it, the budget's nobody considers it a priority, and if nobody sees a vision or a priority or the resources for a project, then it's going to fail. Obviously, apart from the very top level C-level people, most individuals aren't going to know what's going on in every project, so you just want to be passionate about your projects and how you're adding value and what you're doing new and creative and innovative. But if nobody in the organization is there to keep a project going live, then it will starve out and it will terminate naturally. Integration, this is where we've got the project doesn't have a clear delineation with a clear new project starting. It's kind of overlapped, either because the project itself grows in its responsibilities, or because the team as a group, working effectively or for whatever reason, migrates to new projects. Looking at our second of our 4 elements there, the natural termination. This is how projects should naturally complete when they hit the end of their project life cycle. This isn't early termination because of a problem. This is things to do when we're done. Again, this is the difference between the guy turning in the report and saying, hey, I'm on time under budget, and the reply being, great, you'll get less money next time because clearly we gave you too much time and money for this, versus, hey, I'm on time under budget, and here's everything we learned, and here's how we did it, and here's how other projects can do it as well, and here's why what we did should become the norm, and so forth. And at that point, if anything, if you can bring this information and knowledge into the organization, you might actually end up being able to get increased budget and increased resources in the future, because you're not just delivering the end of your project, but you're also adding to the corporate knowledge. So some of the activities here on this list that they talk about is the finishing the work, and I added finishing strong. I think it's very important in all these activities. Once it looks like it's a dead project, once it looks like eyes aren't on it anymore, realize you can bring eyes on it. You can focus attention to it. Nobody else may be. Once you're not competing for resources, once the resources are finite and limited and written off, or at least they're dedicated to this and nobody can go fight for them, it can kind of fall off the radar. It's your job as the project manager to keep eyes on the job, to keep people working hard, working to the finish, to finish up everything that you need to finish up that has value to the organization or to the customer. Now, there might be some things that really do drop off because they're not adding value to the organization, not adding value to the customer, given that the project's wrapping up. But when you can learn lessons, when you can get best principles, when you can interview clients and customers within the organization and team members and what worked well, you need to go ahead and do that. You need to finish strong, and you need to deliver to the customer, because hopefully you're going to retain that customer. So you don't want the client customer, because you don't want to just say, well, this project's done and it's over. It's always easier to keep a customer than it is to get a new customer. Keep a client than get a new client. So you want to keep your existing clients happy, even when the process is winding down. If you can show that you're a strong finisher, that not only impresses the client, it impresses everybody. Finishing strong is always a good characteristic. And that finishing strong involves, handing over the project to the appropriate person, gaining acceptance for the project. Because again, if you finish something, the client needs to get approval of it. It was done for a purpose, and the client, of course, can always be somebody internal. Sometimes it's not internal. Sometimes an external client. But sometimes you're doing a project, and the client is the company itself, your own company. You're doing it internally. Regardless, it was done for a purpose. Try to show the people you were doing it for that it did what it was going to do. Get their take. Did we, or at least find out honestly, did we accomplish our tasks? Have we added the value we thought we were going to add? Harvest those benefits. Pull that information out. Codify it. Get it written in a document somewhere. Get it to be part of the oral tradition in the organization. Reviewing how it went, right? Getting other people's involvement, not just your opinion on these things, and looking at it. Putting it all to bed, making sure that everybody's been paid, making sure that the books are all up to date, making sure that everything balances out, making sure that there's not $100,000 that went missing somehow, doing that whole thing, and then disbanding the team. And when it, again, if you've done the closeout correctly, then the disbanding of the team is actually kind of a moment of celebration, because it's not just we fizzled out. It's the fireworks at the end of the night on 4th of July. It is, we've done everything right. We've learned all this information. This has been a huge success, start to finish, and these are the people that have made this happen, and everybody's clapping. Okay, so that's our goal, or that's your goal. To finish strong, get as much information as you can from the process, and build a deeper, better organizational knowledge and culture because of it. Now, what about the projects that terminate early? Right, step 3 in this chapter is topic 3 in this chapter are the projects that don't have their natural life cycle, that for one reason or another projects have had to terminate early. Even in the case of early termination, you still would like to do the finish strong, but you don't have as much of an opportunity there. You're really looking for, where did we misstep? Did we have a wrong plan to begin with? Did we guess at the market incorrectly? Did we not see the changes that were coming? Sometimes, and I think the next slide I'll talk about that, sometimes things happen you don't get a chance to anticipate and prepare those, and that's fine. But were we just lolling, were we a newspaper company and our new project was to, internal client new project was to build, new black and white printing press, when every other successful newspaper company was investing in their online presence, and we were trying to get, an investment in a new printing press that's supposed to last us 30 years. And again, newspapers need their printing presses, but you need to make sure it's your presence in the market. You can misplay the market even when the road signs are clear. So, one reason or another, our project terminates. Things to do, like they talk about, you want to review the static factors, see what's going on. in that process. Sunk costs are the money you've already spent. Is it looking like this is a bad bet? The only thing I'll say about sunk costs is you don't get that money back by terminating the project. So I was actually a little surprised when they were talking about high sunk costs being a means of terminating a project. The value of the project from this point moving forward should be how you make that determination. If you've spent $50,000 on your project up to this point, you don't get that money back by terminating the project. You need to say, now if that's a predictor and you only anticipated spending, $10,000 and you've spent $50,000, if that's a predictor that's going to be $50,000 every 6 months, which is going to be 5 times your budget, then sure, absolutely. In that sense, sunk costs, if they're a predictor of an over budget project, then that makes sense. But if you spent, you had an unexpected major expense, you sunk $50,000 into a project that only had a $10,000 budget to begin with, but that's not a predictor of moving forward, you shouldn't say, well, let's terminate this project because of high sunk costs. The old phrase, sunk costs are sunk, is what I'm using here, and it's good to remember that. If sunk costs are a predictor, then that's something very different. Other things that can cause projects can be team-based, working with each other. That's one of the things, I think I mentioned this before, I don't remember when, I think I mentioned this in one of our lectures, about if you hire somebody for $45,000, $50,000 a year salary, college educated, few years of experience, you're working in the company, you're making $50,000 a year, you've got to realize that you're not working in isolation. You're working with other people, probably in teams of 3 or 4 on a lot of how you spend your day. And if everybody else is making, well, round numbers, $50,000, then that's a $200,000 investment for a team of 4 people that the company is making. You also have to realize that in addition to your salary, companies are spending close to that amount in overhead costs in terms of insurance and federal taxes and office space and lighting and carpeting and computer equipment and all of that. So if a company could be spending for one $50,000 employee, working in a group makes it up to $200,000, and with overhead it's $350,000. You've got to be adding value. You've got to be working well with others. You've got to be delivering your products on time, clear and usable information, because it's a major investment, much more than your salary. And if you're not helping the organization recoup its costs, you're a liability and you are at risk, not your project. And if you are a type of at-risk person who causes projects to be at risk, then you might hurt that project. But if it comes down to a team member and you're that team member causing problems, that is not the path to career success. Sponsorship, talking about again, if very few people in the organization, if any, knows every single project that's going on and has their finger on it. But somebody has to be the champion of your project. There has to be somebody that thinks this project's worth going on. If you can't get sponsorship, if you can't get a champion, then it's got a good chance of failing. Economics, return on investment, how is this going to play out? Are we going to be able to turn a profit? Especially this is for creating an item, a good or a service that we're going to sell. We want to think about what's going to be the impact on this. But even if it's just growing the brand name within the organization to grow our market share through some kind of a creative advertising campaign, we still want to know there's still economic factors there, environmental factors, again, things that you sometimes can't control, government issues, laws that are passed, natural issues with the elements outside that might increase or decrease items. If you discover land on your oil on the land that you own, it might change how you choose to use that land and the projects you have dedicated to that land. And then the end user, especially if the user is outside the organization, might have some changes. If the market's increasing, if there were netbooks, where the idea right about the time Apple came out with the iPad, laptops were being shrunk down to something called netbooks, and they were about $400 or $500, what ended up being about the price of an iPad, and had a keyboard and had a little screen, but it was only about 8 inches in size, and it was kind of heavy, and the keyboard felt a little tight, but it was the next thing. Unfortunately, it came out at the same time that tablets came out with an entire touchscreen interface, and obviously tablets are very successful, and netbooks probably didn't get their money back, and that was a change in the market that you couldn't have necessarily anticipated at that time. A couple tables from the early termination that are worth talking about. Some warning signs, commercial objectives. If you can't, and you probably shouldn't even started the project at this point, but perhaps your commercial objectives are changing, how we're going to make money off this, how we're going to promote, market, and sell this good or this service. If you can't really put your finger on what it's going to be, that is a sign that this project might not be exactly what it wants to be. Now, I'll step back and say that when they invented the laser, they didn't know what the purpose of the laser was going to be. They just know that being able to focus light very tightly could have a number of implications, and it's obviously proven to have many, 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 many useful applications. So pure research and development doesn't have to have this. So if you're doing a pure R&D project, you might not need that commercial objectives, but typically you're not in an R&D group. Typically most projects are in a deliverables group of a good or a service, and if that's the case, then you probably need to be able to start to spell out and clarify what that is going to be. Lack of authority. If nobody's willing to, again, champion it, give authority to get approval for budget or for time or for resources, that's probably a sign. Market volatility can be a sign that there might be some failure going on. Netbook versus tablets. And if it actually gets prioritized, if the C-level people actually say this is a B-level project versus an A-level project, that's not a good sign, because all A-level projects are going to be able to demand higher resources, better personnel, and so on, and you can starve out the project. Remember, we talked about starving it out versus actually shutting it out. And this chart has more information. I can't even really read it, but it's talking about when you start shutting it down, there's internal issues within the project team, and then there's client-based issues, and they have both emotional issues, thoughts and attitudes and behavior and expectations, and they have intellectual issues. Should we still be working on this? Is this still a priority for the organization? Is this still a priority with the client? So there's emotional within the team, and there's emotional with the client. This is, do you have fear? Or do you have effort? Are you motivated? Are we going to do the work? Do we care? Are people going to show up for meetings? Those are kinds of the emotional issues. And the intellectual issues is mental disagreements, intellectual disagreements. Should this work still be done? Now that the project's closing out, do we still care about this, especially on these early closeouts? I know we talked about doing these level of deliverables for this date, but that's when the project was supposed to run until 2025, and now we're ending it early. So what are we going to do with that? So those become some issues there. In fact, sometimes you have claims and disputes. If there's a disagreement, then you've got to deal with those claims and those disputes. And you might say, well, let's just go to the contract. If we've got a contract, that'll explain exactly how we're going to do this. Unfortunately, that's not exactly the way it works. Sometimes even with a contract, there can still be disagreements. That's why there are lawyers, not just who write contracts, but there's lawyers who interpret contracts and enforce contracts, and judges and juries and all of that, even over contractual issues. One way of handling that is to potentially go to arbitration. You can submit yourself to binding arbitration, where whatever the arbiter determines in the situation, hears both sides and makes an answer. Everybody just submits to that, and that's sometimes the best way to resolve a dispute where both parties can't come up with it. You can also have arbitration that's non-binding. The fourth of our items from this chapter is preparing the final report. The final report, it's really valuable to the organization. It's valuable to you as the project manager to use this as a time to celebrate what you have done, to add value to the project that you've been working on, and to prepare your success for the future. This is an opportunity to identify concerns, to enact processes, to formalize lessons learned, to improve the business culture and history on projects. You highlight both the strengths and the weaknesses of the project, and learn from those individually and as an organization. The elements of the final report include a number of project and organizational factors, as it says here: project performance, administrative performance, organizational structure, team performance, techniques of project management, benefits to the organization, the customer. Again, all the idea here is we want to not just hand in a one-page summary that says, hey, here's our percentage of our budget, and here's the percentage of our timeline, and here's a checklist of our initial product specifications, good or service that we were creating, and how close we lined up with it. We're done. Shake the dust off your hands and move along. It's really a chance to step back and learn from your experience. Experience is a valuable teacher. Everybody wants to hire somebody with 2 to 3 years of experience. Why is that? Because experience, if you take the chance to learn from your lessons, you're not going to repeat yourself. The guy who has 2 burned ears, you say, what's up? And the first burned ear, he said, well, I was ironing and somebody called. And you think, oh, okay, I understand how you burned your ear. You answered the iron. Why is your other ear burned? And he says they called back, right? It's a terrible joke, I know, but you want to learn from your experience. And the project report, the final report, this is your chance to learn from your experience. Take advantage of it. This is probably going to be the key element that, again, this is unique to project management and process management. There's Kaizen, there's constant improvement, 10% better, 5% better year over year all the time is a goal. But in project management, you wrap the thing up completely. And this is where you take a very intentional activity of summarizing the whole experience and what lessons learned. Okay, chapter summary, just real quick. The things we talked about here, distinguishing the 4 main forms of project termination: extinction, addition, integration, and starvation. Addition being the desired one where it really adds value to the corporate culture and the identity. Starvation, there's nobody there to support it, so it dies itself out. Integration, bringing everybody together, and extinction being the more common of those. Recognize the key steps for formal project closeout. Finish the work, and Dr. Cruz adds an asterisk there, finish it strong. The way you finish has a lot to do with the way you're perceived. Strong finishers are always respected. And it says you want to be, and you want people to think of you as a strong finisher and as a person who learns from your experience. If you can get those 2 things out of your project closeout, you are doing very well, and you are helping yourself significantly. Understand the reasons for termination. We spent a few slides on this, looking at some of the tables and the charts and all the different things that can happen. Sunk costs being a factor, and if they're predictors, okay, but don't blindly choose those. Don't blindly just look, hey, we're a little bit over budget, so let's stop now. Figure out why you're over budget. Is that a predictor? What's going to happen? And so on. So sometimes projects have to close out early, sometimes because tablets come out and you're building netbooks or whatever. And then that final project report, once we get to that stage, use that to position yourself to learn and become a better person, but also in a very public way to draw attention to yourself. So take advantage of the final project report. It's a great opportunity for you to continue to have success and growth within the organization. Okay, thank you all. Have a great day.